Good evening. Today, there will be a discussion about the Cold War in Iraq. They will basically debate from the beginning to how it is right now. They've been preparing for this for a long time, and now is the time to prove all the effort. In a few minutes, we're going to start the debate. Please take your seats and pay attention.
In 1979, Saddam Hussein took the power in Iraq. Iran and Iraq have long had an uneasy relationship. This is mostly because of religious problems. Although both nations are Muslims, Iranians are predominantly Shiite Muslims, and Iraq is full with Sunni Muslims. Another problem is over territory. Both nations fought over the Strait of Hormuz.
Why is that strait so important?
This was very important because it connected the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. In 1980, Saddam Hussein launched an attack on Iran. Children were used to clear dangerous minefields, and poison gas was thrown into civilians, especially the Kurds. The Kurds were an ethnic group and was a minority of Iraq. Finally, a ceasefire was signed in 1988.
The President Bush told the American people that an axis of evil is about to happen.
And what do you mean with the axis of evil?
But Bush considered Iraq a more immediate threat to the world.
Why Iraq is the major threat?
Saddam Hussein had already used chemical weapons in Iraq against the Iran war. And in 1990, Iraqi troops moved across the border and occupied Kuwait.
Now, following the Gulf War in 1991, many inspectors were sent to.
So who sent these inspectors and what's their purpose?
Well, these were actually UN inspectors, and the main purpose was to find anything suspicious from Iraq. They actually found that Iraq was working in some nuclear bombs and biological process, which were like really dangerous for other countries who were involved with Iraq. Uh, so, so when the inspectors came back with all this information, the UN Security Council debated on what to do about this information, and actually the U.S. President Bush wanted to state a resolution which meant that he could attack Iraq because the U.S. was afraid that these nuclear bombs were going to use against them. So the UN accepted this resolution, which meant that inspectors were going to come back in Iraq at any moment, and if they find anything suspicious, or if Iraq didn't state how many bombs they had and on what they were working on, they will have serious consequences. So when the inspectors came back with all this information, the UN Security Council debated on what to do about this information, and actually the U.S. President Bush wanted to state a resolution which meant that he could attack Iraq because the U.S. was afraid that these nuclear bombs were going to use against them. So the UN accepted this resolution, which meant that inspectors were going to come back in Iraq at any moment, and if they find anything suspicious, or if Iraq didn't state how many bombs they had and on what they were working on, they will have serious consequences. Another part of this resolution was to Iraq to stop the favoritism to terrorism and to stop persecuting opponents of Hussein within Iraq. The resolution threatened serious consequences that if Iraq did not comply. At that point, the United States, with the support of many other countries, started to prepare for war.
So Great Britain was involved in these problems in any way or at any time?
Great Britain started to prepare for war actually as well. And this caused a lot of fear, not only in Iraq, if not in the United States and Great Britain, and there was actually many anti-war people who wanted to stop this, and they argue that Iraq had nothing to do with the 9 of September 11 attacks, and that the weapons that they were producing were not as an offensive attack, if not more of a defensive technique.
On March 20, 2003, the US-led coalition attacked Iraq. Many soldiers refused to risk their lives for Hussein. On May the 1st, President Bush declared that the major combat was over. About 140 Americans had died.
So, did America found any evidence of those weapons?
Americans had found no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. In January 2004, David Kay stated that we are very unlikely to find large stockpiles of weapons. And finally, on December 2003, Hussein was captured.
Yes.
So after Hussein was captured, bombings and sporadic battles continued, and violence continued too. So in May 2004, war was officially declared over, but violence continued and continued. So in June 28th of that same year, the USA transferred sovereignty to Iraq. Ajad Alawi was officially the first prime minister of Iraq. That was an historic day for Iraqis and the whole country.
Of course, this war still continues, and there is many consequences. For example, Iraq's debts and debts with other people.